I am Christian, 29 years old, and the moment that fractured my world began with a sharp slap of photographs hitting the polished wooden table. My sister-in-law's hand lingered over the glossy images, her eyes burning with cruel satisfaction as she pronounced her judgment. Images of me, twisted illusions, fabricated evidence meant to paint me as unfaithful, as undeserving of the vows I had lived by with every breath. My husband's silence was worse than any accusation. It was a void that swallowed every memory we had built over 10 years, erasing the laughter, the promises, the sacrifices, leaving only a hollow gaze that pierced through me like a dagger. My chest tightened, my fingers trembled as I clutched my bag, desperate to hold on to something solid as the floor beneath me gave way. The room around me blurred, the curtains heavy with dusk, the walls once warm now pressing down like prison bars, the ticking of the clock stretching each second into an eternity of shame. Their stares crushed me, my sister-in-law's venom-laced smile clashing with my husband's unbearable silence. In that instant, betrayal wrapped around me like ice, stripping away the skin of loyalty I had worn for a decade. I walked out of that house with a heart shattered into unrecognizable shards, yet beneath the devastation, something ancient stirred. They thought I was broken, discarded, erased. What they didn't know was that betrayal, once it burns you to ashes, leaves you unbreakable. My tears dried on my cheeks as I stepped into the night, the sky heavy with storm clouds that mirrored the rage swelling in my chest. I would not beg, I would not plead, I would not collapse beneath their lies. If they believed they could erase me so easily, they had forgotten who I truly was. They had mistaken silence for weakness, loyalty for blindness, love for vulnerability. But I had seen the truth in their eyes. I had felt the knife twist in my back, and I knew now what my path would be. Revenge would not be quick, nor loud. It would be deliberate, merciless, and unforgettable. That night, as thunder cracked in the distance, I whispered to myself that their betrayal was my rebirth, and every scar they left behind would become the blade I used to carve their downfall. The rain began that night as if the sky itself mourned what I had lost, but in its relentless rhythm against the windows of my small apartment, I heard something different, a call to rise, to transform, to reclaim what had been stolen. My mind, once consumed by love and duty, shifted into a landscape of strategy, each memory of humiliation turning into a map of vengeance. I could still see my husband's eyes when he refused to defend me, could still hear the subtle tremor of triumph in my sister-in-law's voice as she threw those staged photographs across the table, shattering a decade of trust with fabricated lies. Every image was a weapon designed to sever me from my marriage, my dignity, my identity, and yet I refused to let those manipulated fragments define me. I began collecting pieces of truth the way others collect precious jewels, emails he thought I'd never see, bank transactions hidden beneath coded numbers, late-night absences explained away with weak excuses. Each discovery fueled me, not with sadness, but with resolve. The betrayal was not only theirs, it was layered, premeditated, deliberate, and the deeper I dug, the more I realized they had plotted my erasure long before that night at the table. My sister-in-law had always envied my place, my closeness with her brother, the trust one once believed unbreakable. She planted seeds of suspicion in his mind, watered them with poison until his silence became complicity. They both underestimated me, believing my devotion had made me blind, believing my gentleness was fragility. But as I walked through empty streets under the glow of flickering lamps, I felt the storm inside me aligning with the storm above. Every crack of thunder reminded me that silence can be the deadliest force of all, and patience the sharpest blade. I vowed I would not attack recklessly. I would dismantle them piece by piece, not through anger but through precision, leaving nothing behind but the ruins of the empire they had built on deception. What began as heartbreak was evolving into a mission, and with each passing day, I shed the skin of the woman they betrayed, becoming someone they could no longer recognize, someone they would one day fear. The first blow I struck was not loud, not visible, but it landed with the precision of a scalpel cutting into flesh too deep to heal. My sister-in-law, who had strutted through life cloaked in her fabricated virtue, had secrets far darker than the ones she hurled at me. Behind her polished facade lay gambling debts, concealed affairs, and hushed arguments with strangers who called her phone long after midnight. I gathered evidence in silence, stitching every fragment into a narrative that would unravel her carefully crafted mask. With anonymous precision, I released whispers into the ears of those she desperately needed to impress, colleagues, friends, even the women who once envied her grace. The cracks formed quickly, her once flawless reputation splintering into questions, doubts, accusations. I didn't need to lift a finger further. The same society she weaponized against me became the blade that gutted her pride. Meanwhile, my husband, once the man I entrusted my soul to, was not beyond my reach. His betrayal was not only in silence, but in indulgence. He had sought comfort in the arms of another long before the photographs were staged. Proof flowed into my hands as if fate itself conspired with me. Hotel bills, hidden messages, careless slips he thought I would never uncover. I didn't confront him with these truths. I exposed them where they would cut the deepest, sending the evidence to those who held his professional standing in their hands. His colleagues, his superiors, his so-called friends now saw the hollow man behind the image he had fought to preserve. His downfall was slower, heavier, like a grand structure collapsing under the weight of its own decay, and I watched with an icy calm as the world turned its back on him as swiftly as he had turned his back on me. And yet, as their lives splintered, as the revenge I had sculpted bloomed in chaos, an emptiness lingered, gnawing at the edges of my triumph. Nights stretched endlessly, silence pressing against my chest, reminding me that justice and healing are not the same. I had torn them down, yes, but in their ashes I was still alone, haunted by the hollow echo of love betrayed. Still, I pressed forward, because vengeance was no longer a choice. It had become my breath, my pulse, the very rhythm of who I was becoming. Their decline was no longer a ripple. It had become a tidal wave, swallowing everything they once clung to, and I, standing on the shore, watched as the water dragged them under. My sister-in-law's face, once painted with smug superiority, now carried the hollow eyes of a woman stripped bare, her debts exposed, her friends vanished, her nights consumed with frantic calls that no one answered. My husband, once a man of stature and certainty, crumbled into fragments as whispers of his infidelity spread through his workplace, unraveling not only his career but the false dignity he wore like armor. I walked among them unseen, invisible yet omnipresent, the architect of their undoing, the phantom presence in every ruined connection, every severed tie. Yet with each step of their collapse, I felt an unsettling stillness within me. Victory was not the roaring fire I had imagined, but a cold flame that illuminated the emptiness they had left in my soul. Revenge had given me power, yes, but it could not give me back the 10 years I had surrendered, the nights I had wept silently beside the man who betrayed me, the moments of trust one had placed in family that chose deception over love. Still, I pressed onward, because my journey was not yet complete. There was one final act I had to deliver, not to destroy them further, for they were already ruined, but to reclaim myself fully, to stand before the ruins not as a victim or even as a victor, but as someone reborn. I began writing, chronicling every wound, every betrayal, every triumph of resilience, pouring it onto pages that bled with both anguish and strength. My story was no longer theirs to twist. It was mine to command, a testimony that I had endured, that betrayal had not broken me, but forged me into something they could never silence. The more I wrote, the more I realized this was not just a weapon but a beacon for others who had suffered as I had, for those who had been erased by lies, by silence, by betrayal. And as my words took shape, I felt the storm within me calm, not because I had destroyed them, but because I had finally found a way to free myself from them. The final chapter of my vengeance was not written with destruction but with reclamation, and as I stood in the wreckage of the lives that once overshadowed mine, I understood at last the true weight of what I had endured. My sister-in-law, a woman who had sharpened betrayal into a blade, now walked through the world as a hollow echo of herself, her reputation disintegrated, her debts chaining her every move. My husband, the man who chose silence over truth, no longer commanded respect, but lived in the shadows of his own disgrace, his name whispered with pity and contempt by those who once admired him. Their collapse was complete, their power extinguished, and though I had once thought their suffering would fill the void inside me, I discovered something far more powerful: freedom. 4 years. My life had been tethered to their lies, my heart shackled by loyalty to people who never deserved it, but now I was untethered. I walked forward not as the woman they betrayed, but as the woman I forged through fire, the woman who turned ashes into armor. My words, the story I bled onto paper, began to travel beyond me, reaching hearts I would never meet, reminding others that betrayal may wound, but it can also awaken. I realized my revenge was not only for myself, it was a message, a legacy, a call to anyone who has ever been silenced, telling them they are stronger than they know. And now, to you watching, if my journey has stirred something within you, if you have felt my pain, my fire, my rise from the depths of despair, then let this story live beyond these moments. If you love this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. Your support fuels more amazing stories like this, and together we will keep the flame of truth and resilience alive.